This is infused lemon and ginger water. Oh, it's so spicy and sour. I am on a water fast currently, and this is one of my tonics that I make for a water fast. So delicious. Okay, so good. Today, I am reading Chapter 2, Wonder Woman Warbringer. Lee Bardugo, Wonder Woman Warbringer. Chapter 2. I've already read the intro. I made an intro video, ASMR reading video, to this book, the Wonder Woman Warbringer book. And I also read Chapter 1. So this is Chapter 2. Here we go, Chapter 2. Get my comfy pillow. Should I have tied her up? Diana wondered as she scaled the cliff. Should I have tied her up? Diana wondered as she scaled the cliff. The noon sun warming her shoulders after the chill of the cave. No, she didn't have any rope, and tying up a girl who had almost died didn't seem like the right thing to do. But she'd need to have answers ready when she returned. Aaliyah had been shaken by the wreck, but she was coming back to herself, and clearly she wasn't a fool. She wouldn't be content to stay in the cave for long. Diana lengthened her stride. There was no point in going to Bana Migal to retrieve the flag. She would return to the arena and make some kind of excuse, but she couldn't think beyond that. The farther she got from the cliffs, the more foolish her decision seemed. A cold, prickling fear coiled just beneath her ribs. The island had its own rules, its own prohibitions, and there were reasons for all of them. No weapons were carried except for training and exhibition. The few off-island missions permitted were those sanctioned by the Amazon Council and the Oracle, and then only to preserve the isolation of the Mesquira. She needed to get Aaliyah back to the mortal world as soon as possible. Days would pass among the humans while Leah waited in her cave. Rescue ships might be sent for her lost boat. If Diana moved quickly enough, maybe she can get Aaliyah out of there on another craft so that she could rendezvous with them. Even the girl tried to tell authorities about Themyscira. Even if the girl decided to tell the authorities about Themyscira, and by some chance they believed her, Aaliyah would never be able to find her way back to the island. And Diana's heart gave a sick thud. The race was over. Someone had claimed the laurel crown, and she'd been so sure she would wear it today. I saved a life, she reminded herself. And the thought was hardly comforting. If anyone found out about Aaliyah, Diana would be sent from her home forever. All of the island's rules, the prohibition against outsiders, was the most sacred. Only Amazons who had won the right to a life on Themyscira belonged here. They died gloriously in battle, proving their courage and heart. And if by their last moments they cried out, to a goddess, they might be offered a new life, one of peace and honor among sisters, Athena, Chandrakanta, Pele, Bana, goddesses from all over the world, warriors of every nation. Each Amazon had learned her place on the island, all but Diana, of course. That prickling coil tightened in her gut. Maybe rescuing Aaliyah hadn't been a misstep, but something fixed in Diana's fate. If she had never really belonged on the island, maybe exile was inevitable. She hurried her steps as the towers of Ephesium came into view, but her feet felt weighted with dread. How exactly was she going to face her mother after this? Too soon the dirt of the road became thick slabs of Istrian stone, white and weathered beneath her bare feet. As she entered the city, she felt as if she could see people staring down at her from their balconies and open gardens, their curious eyes dogging her path to the arena. It was one of the most beautiful buildings in the city, a crown of glowing white stone perched atop slender arches. They emblazoned with the name of a different champion. Each emblazoned with the name of a different champion. I have a little bit of cayenne in here as well. It's so spicy and sour, it's delicious. Diana passed beneath the arch dedicated to Penthesilea. She could hear cheering and feet stamping, and when she emerged into the sunlit arena, the sight that greeted her was worse than she'd expected. She hadn't just lost, she was the last to return. The visitors were on the podium, and the presentation of the laurels had already begun. Naturally, Ronnie had placed first. Rainey had placed first. She'd been a distance runner in her life as a mortal and as an Amazon. The worst part was how much Diana liked her. She was relentlessly humble and kind, and even offered to help Diana train. Diana wondered if it got tiring being splendid all the time. Maybe heroes were just like that. As she made her way toward the dais, she forced herself to smile. Though the sun had helped her dry her, she was keenly aware of the rumpled mess of her tunic, the seawater knots in her hair. Perhaps if she acted like the race hadn't mattered, it wouldn't. But she'd only taken a few steps when Tech emerged from the crowd and slung an arm around her neck. Diana stiffened, then hated herself because she knew Tech could tell. "Aw, little Pixis," Tech crooned. "You get bogged down in the mud. Did you get bogged down in the mud?" A soft hiss rose from the people standing nearby. They all understood the insult. Little Pixis made of clay. Diana grinned. "Miss me, Tech? There's got to be someone else around here for you to judge." A few chuckles bubbled from the crowd. "Keep walking," Diana told herself. "Keep your head high." The problem was that Tech was a born general. She sensed weakness and knew exactly where to find the cracks. "You gotta give as good as you get," Maeve had warned Diana, or Tech wouldn't back down. "She's cautious around Hippolyta. She's cautious around Hippolyta, but eventually you're the one who's going to sit in that throne." Not if Tech has her way, Diana thought. "Don't be cross, Pixis," said Tech. "There's always next time, and the time after that." As Diana moved through the spectators, she heard Tech's allies chiming in. "Maybe they'll move the finish line for the next race," said Otrada. "Why not?" Thyra replied. "There are different rules when you're royalty." That was a direct slight to her mother, but Diana grinned as if nothing in the world could bother her. "Amazing how some people never tire of the same thing, isn't it?" she said as she strolled towards the step that led to the Loyal Lodge. "You only learn one dance. I guess you have to keep doing it." Some of the onlookers nodded approvingly. They wanted a princess who didn't flinch at the easy barbs, who stood her ground, who could spar with words instead of fists. After all, what real harm had Tech caused? Sometimes Diana wished Tech would challenge her outright. She'd lose, but she'd rather take a beating than constantly pretend that the taunts and jabs didn't bother her. It was tiring knowing that every time she faltered, someone would be there to notice. But that wasn't the worst of it. At least Tech was honest about what she thought. The hardest thing was knowing that, though many of the people smiling at her right now might be kind to her, might even show her loyalty because she was her mother's daughter and they loved their queen, they would never believe Diana worthy, not to walk among them, certainly not to wear a crown. And they were right. Diana was the only Amazon who had been born an Amazon. If Tech found out about Aaliyah, if she discovered that what Diana had done, she'd have everything she'd ever wanted. Diana banished from the island, the clay girl lost to the world of man, and Tech would never have to challenge Hippolyta outright. "Well, she's not going to find out," Diana promised herself. There has to be a way to get Aaliyah off the island. Diana just needed to secure a boat, get Aaliyah on it, and find some human to hand her off to on the other side of the boundary. Or she could tell the truth. Face ridicule, a trial if she was to be lucky, instant exile if she wasn't. The deities of the goddesses who had formed the Themyscira were not to be taken lightly, and no offerings to Hera or prayers to Athena would change what she'd done. Would Diana's mother speak on her behalf, offer excuses for her daughter's failings, or just follow the punishment demanded by law. Diana wasn't sure which would be worse. Forget it, she would get a boat somehow. She scaled the steps of the Queen's Lodge, keenly aware that all attention had shifted from the visitors' podium to her. Light filtered through the silken overhang, casting the shaded platform in red and blue, jasmine tumbling from its railings in sweet-smelling clouds. There were no seasons on Themyscira, but Hippolyta had the vines and plants changed with every equinox and solstice. We mustn't mark time, she told Diana. We must work to maintain our connection to the mortal world. We are not gods. We must always remember we were born mortal. Not all of us, Diana had thought, but she hadn't said it at the time. Sometimes it's as if Hippolyta had forgotten Diana's origins, or maybe she just wanted to. There are different rules when you're royalty. Diana had no doubt that her mother had seen her as soon as she entered the arena, but now Hippolyta turned as if glimpsing her for the first time, and smiled in welcome. She opened her arms and embraced Diana briefly. It was the proper thing to do. Diana had lost. If her mother showed too much warmth, it would perceive as foolish or inappropriate. If she treated Diana too coldly, it might be seen as rejection and could have far-reaching repercussions. The embrace was as it should be, and nothing more, balanced on the sword's edge of politics. So why did it still prick her heart? Diana knew her role. She remained at her mother's side as they placed the crown of laurel on the victors' heads, and smiled and congratulated the morning's competitors. But the cold coil of worry in her belly seemed to have sprouting tentacles. And with every passing moment, they squeezed tighter. She told herself to fidget, to stop checking the position of the sun in the sky. She felt sure her mother could tell something was wrong. Diana could only hope Hippolyta would blame her behavior on the shame of losing the race. The games would continue through the afternoon, followed by a new play at the amphitheater in the evening. Diana hoped to be back to the cave before then, but there was no escaping the first feast. Long tables had been set in the gardens besides the arena, laden with warm bread, heaps of poached cuttlefish, grilled strips of venison, and pitchers of wine and mare's milk. Diana forced herself to take some rice and fish and pushed a piece of fresh honeycomb around her plate. It was usually her favorite, but her gut was too full of worry. She caught Maeve's questioning glance from the end of the table, but she had to remain with her mother. Besides, what exactly was she going to tell Maeve? I definitely would have won, but I was busy transgendering against divine law. In Pontus, we would have a lamb grilled on the spit. In Pontus, we would have had a lamb grilled on the spit, Tex said, pushing at the venison on her plate. Proper meat, not this gamey stuff. No animal was raised for slaughter on the island. If meat was wanted, it had to be hunted. It was not a rule created by the goddesses or a condition demanded by the island, but Hippolyta's law. She valued all life. Tech valued her stomach. Hippolyta just laughed. If you can't find meat worthy eating, drink more wine. Tech raised her glass and they clinked cups, and then bent their heads together, giggling like girls. Diana had never seen anyone make Hippolyta laugh the way Tech did. They'd fought side by side in the mortal world, ruled together, argued together, and together they'd chosen to turn from the world of man. They were Protus Adelphus, the first of the Amazons on Themyscira, sisters in all but blood. They didn't hate Hippolyta. Tech didn't hate Hippolyta. Diana was fairly sure she couldn't hate her, only what she'd done when she created Diana. Hippolyta made life from nothing. She'd brought a girl into being on Themyscira. She made an Amazon when only the gods could do such a thing. Once Diana was just a child. She'd woken in her palace bedroom to hear them arguing. She'd slid from her bed, the marble cold beneath her feet. She'd padded down the hall to Iolanthe Court. This was the heart of their home, a wide terrace of graceful columns that overlooked the gardens below and the city beyond. The palace was full of objects that hinted at the world her mother had known before the island. A golden cup, a shallow, black calyx painted with dancing women, a saddle made of tufted felt, pieces of puzzle Diana had never been able to fit together into a whole story. But Iolanthe Court held no mysteries. It ran the length of the western side of the palace, open on 3 sides, so that it was always flooded with sunlight beyond the sound of fountains burbling in the gardens below. Sweet waxy plumeria twined down its columns, and its balustrade was marked by potted orange trees that drew the gossipy buzz of bees and hummingbirds. Diana and her mother took most of their meals at the long table that was always cluttered with Diana's school books, half-full glasses of water, wine, a dish of figs, or a spilly freshly cut flowers. It was where Hippolyta welcomed new Amazons to Themyscira after they had been purified, her voice low and gracious as she explained the rules of the island. But with Tech, Hippolyta ceased to be dignified, benevolent queen, ceased to be the dignified, benevolent queen. She was not the mother that Diana knew, either. She was someone else, someone a little wild and careless, someone who slouched in her chair and snorted when she laughed. Hippolyta was not laughing that night. She was pacing back and forth on the terrace, the silks of her saffron-colored robe billowing behind her like a banner of war. She's a child, Tech. There is nothing dangerous about her. She is a danger to our very way of life, Tech said. She was seated on a bench at the long table in her riding clothes, elbows resting on the table, legs stretched out before her. You know the law, no outsiders. She isn't an outsider. She's a little girl. She was made of this island's very earth, fashioned by my own hands. She's never even been outside. There were rules, Hippolyta. We are immortal. We're not meant to conceive, and the island was intended for those of us who have known the perils of war, of the world of man, who knows what it is to fight against the endless tide of mortal violence, who chose to turn away from it. You have no right to make that decision for Diana. She will be raised in a world without conflict. She will walk a land in which blood has never been spilled. Then how will she know how to value it? The gods did not intend this. They made their laws for reasons, and you have subverted them. The goddesses blessed her. They endowed her with living breath, made my blood to flow in her veins, bestowed their gift upon her. She sat down beside Tech. Be reasonable. Do you think that it was my power that gave her life? You know none of us have magic like that. Tech took Hippolyta's hands in hers, seated like that, hands clasped. They looked like they were making a pact, like they were clouding over some wonderful plan, coddling. Hippolyta, Tech said gently, when do the gods give such a gift without exacting a price? There's always a danger, always a cost. And if we hadn't seen it yet, even if we hadn't seen it yet, and what would you have me do? I don't know. Tech rose and rested her hand on the balustrade. looking out at the dark stretch of the city and sea. Diana remembered being surprised by how many lanterns were still lit in the houses below, as if this were if, as if this were the appointed hour in which adults argued. You put us in an impossible position. There will be reckoning for this, Hippolyta, and all for the sake of something to call your own. Yummy. Lemon juice is good for your skin. She belongs to us, Tech, all of us. Hippolyta laid hands on Tech's arm, and for a moment, Diana thought they might make peace, but then Tech shrugged her off. You made the choice. Tell yourself what you need to do, Highness. But we'll all pay the price. Now Diana watched Tech and her mother talking as if that argument and all the others that had followed didn't matter, as if Tech's regular torment of Diana was a fond game. Hippolyta had always waved away Tech's behavior, her coldness, claiming that it would fade as the years passed and no disaster befell Themyscira. Instead, it had gotten worse. Diana was almost 17, and the only thing that seemed to have changed was that she presented a bigger target. Diana's eyes flicked to the sundial at the center of the feasting grounds. Aaliyah had been alone in the cave for nearly 3 hours. Diana didn't have time to fret over Tech. She needed to figure out how she was going to get her hands on a boat. As if she could read Diana's mind, Tech said, Somewhere you need to be, princess. Somewhere you need to be, princess. Her eyes were slightly narrowed, her gaze speculative. Tech saw too much. It was probably what made her such a great leader. I can't think of anywhere, Diana said pleasantly. If I didn't know better, I'd think you wanted me to leave. Enough of that, Hippolyta said with a flick of her hand, as if she could simply wipe away discord. And sure enough, the musicians began to play, and the feast table filled with song and laughter. Diana moved the food around on her plate and did her best to be merry as the sun arched westward. She couldn't be the first one to leave, and the risk looking like she was sulking after her loss. At last, Ronnie rose from the table and stretched. Who wants to run the beach? She asked. She held the red silk flag aloft and shouted, Catch me if you can. Chairs were shoved backwards as the Amazons rose, whooping and cheering, to follow Rainey down the shore before the next round of games began. Diana took a chance to slip away to the alcove where Maeve was watching. She wore a crushed velvet tunic in the pale celadon that barely counted as a dress, and that she had paired with nothing but sandals, and sent a circlet of leaf-bright beads braided into her hair. I think you may be missing your trousers, Diana said, as Maeve looped an arm through hers, and they headed toward the palace. Two things I love best about this place: the lack of rain and the lack of propriety. Sweet mother of all good things, I thought that meal would never end. I know. I was seated across from Tech. Was she terrible? No more than usual. I think she was on good behavior because of my mother and Rainey. Is it hard to be petty around Rainey? It is hard to be petty around Rainey. She always makes you feel your time would be better spent improving yourself or embezzling her profile on a coin. They passed beneath the colonnade, thick with curling grapevines. Maeve, Diana said, as casually as she could, "Do you know if the council has mentioned a mission on the horizon anytime soon?" Don't start that again. It was just a question. Even if by some chance they did, you know your mother would never let you go. She can't keep me here forever. Actually, she can. She's the queen, remember? Diana scowled, but Maeve continued on. She's going to use any excuse to keep you here. You gave her a good one today. What happened? What went wrong? Diana hesitated. She didn't want to lie to Maeve. She didn't want to lie to anyone. Still, she shared the secret. If she shared the secret, Maeve would be forced to either reveal Diana's crime or keep Diana's confidence. There were rocks blocking the northern road, said Diana. Some kind of landslide. Maeve frowned. A landslide? Do you think anyone followed you, knew your route? We're not actually suggesting sabotage. Tech wouldn't. You're not actually suggesting sabotage. Tech wouldn't she? No, Diana thought, but didn't say. Tech doesn't think she has to sabotage me. She thinks I can fail all on my own. And Diana had proven her right. Hey, Maeve said, giving Diana's shoulders a squeeze. There will be other races, and Maeve seized Diana's arm. Her eyes rolled back and she swayed on her feet. Maeve, Diana gasped. Maeve crumpled to her knees. Diana curled her arm around her waist, supporting her. Her friend's skin felt wrong. It was too hot to the touch. What's the matter? What is it? I don't know, Maeve panted, then bent double, releasing a loud howl of pain. Diana felt it a second later, the echo of Maeve's anguish. All Amazons were connected by blood, even Diana through her mother. When one felt pain, they all shared it. Women were already running towards them, Tech at the lead. What happened? Tech asked, helping Diana raise Maeve to her feet. Nothing, Diana said, her panic spiking. We were just talking and she... Hell's hound, swore Tech. She's burning up with fever. An infection? Asked Thyra. Diana shook her head. She has no wounds. Could it be something she ate? Or Tara suggested. Tef scoffed. At the feast? Don't be absurd. Maeve, were you foraging today? Did you eat anything in the woods? Mushrooms, berries? Maeve shook her head, her body convulsed on a thready sob. Let's get her to bed and try to cool her body down, said Tech. Fetch water, ice, from the kitchens. Thyra, go get Yijun. She is experienced as a field medic. We'll take Maeve to the palace dormitory. Maeve lives in the Caminus now, said Diana. New Amazons spent their first years in the dormitory connected to the palace before they chose which part of the city they wanted to live in. Diana had visited Maeve's new lodgings just the other day. This is a contagion. I want it isolated. The dormitory is empty and easy to quarantine. A contagion, said Otera in horror. Go, commanded Tech. Thyra ran towards the town to find the medic, said Diana, and Diana's bolted down to the palace kitchens to fetch a pitcher of ice. When she found Maeve and Tech in the dormitory, Maeve was huddled beneath this thin sheet, quivering. Diana sent a pitcher beside the bed and stared helplessly at her friends. Thyra ran towards town to find the medic. Oh. What is this? It is a fever, Tech said grimly. She is sick. This couldn't be happening. It wasn't possible. Amazons don't get sick. Well, she is, snapped Tech. Thyra raced into the room, her golden hair flying. The medic is coming, but 2 more alarms were raised in town. Fevers? Were they at the feast? I don't know, but suddenly the whole room seemed to shift. The walls shook, and the floor heaved like a beast walking from a deep sleep. The pitcher of ice tipped and shattered on the tiles. Thyra slammed into the wall. Diana had to grab the door jamb to keep from falling. The shaking stopped as quickly as it started. The only signs of anything that happened were the broken pitcher and the lanterns that continued to sway on their hooks. Freya's braids, said Thyra. Freya's braids, said Thyra. What was that? Tech's expression was bleak. An earthquake. Here, said Thyra disbelievingly. I need another lemon. It makes my mouth water. Helps me to keep reading smoothly. Here, said Thyra disbelievingly. I need to find the queen, said Tech. Wait for the medic. She strode from the room, boots crunching over shards of pitcher and ice. Diana unfolded a blanket and tucked it around Maeve. She brushed the red hair back from her friend's face. Maeve's skin was too white beneath her freckles, and her eyes moved restlessly beneath her pale lids. Contagion, quarantine, earthquake. These words did not belong on Themyscira. What if they'd come with Aaliyah? What if Diana had brought this language of affliction to her people? No mortal was to set foot on Themyscira. The law was clear. In Amazon history, only 2 women had dared to violate it. Kahina had brought a mortal child back from a mission, desperate to save her from the death on the battlefield. She begged to be allowed to raise the girl on the island, but in the end they'd both been exiled to the world of man. The second was Nessa, who had tried to secret her mortal lover aboard a ship when she returned to Themyscira. As a child, Diana had asked to hear Nessa's story again and again, wiggling in her bed, anticipating the horrible ending, the image of Nessa standing on the shore, stripped of her armor as the earth shook and the winds howled. So angered was the island, so angered were the gods. Diana had always remembered the final words of the story as told by the poet Evandre. One by one, her sisters turned their backs, as they must, and though they wept, their salt tears were nothing to the sea. So Nessa passed from mercy into the mists, and to the lands beyond, where men breathe war as air, and life is as the wing beat of a moth, barely seen, barely understood before it's gone. What can we say of her suffering except that it was brief? Diana had shuddered at the shrug in those words. She watched the moths that gathered around the lanterns, her mother's terrace, and tried to fasten her gaze on the blur of their wings. There and gone, at that fast. But now it was Evandre's other words that she recalled with such terrible feeling of recognition. The earth shook and the winds howled. So angered was the island, so angered were the gods. When Diana had rescued Aaliyah, she'd believed the risk she was taking was for herself alone, not for her sisters, not for Maeve. Diana squeezed Maeve's hand. "I'll be back," she whispered. She hurried out the door and ran across the columned court that connected the dormitory to the palace. "Tech," she called, jogging to catch up with her. As Tech turned, another tremor struck. Diana careened into a column, her shoulders striking the stone painfully. Tech barely checked her stride. "Go back to your friend," she said as Diana trailed her up the palace stairs to the Queen's quarters. "Tech, what's causing this?" "I don't know. Something is out of balance." Tech strode into the upper rooms of the royal quarters without hesitation. Hippolyta was at the long table, consulting with one of her runners, a fleet-footed girl named Sabah. Hippolyta looked up as they entered. "I know, Tech," she said. "I sent for a runner as soon as the earthquake hit." She folded the message she'd penned and then sealed it with red wax, marking it with her ring. "Get to Bonamigdal as fast as you can, but be cautious. Something is wrong on the island." The runner vanished down the stairs. "There have been at least 3 reports of illness," said Tech. "Are you sure that's what it is?" Hippolyta asked. "I saw one of the victims myself." "Maeve," Diana added. "It may be striking the younger Amazons first," said Hippolyta. "Not all of them," muttered Tech, casting a sidelong look at Diana. But Hippolyta's gaze was focused on the western sea. She sighed and said, "We'll have to consult the oracle." Do I have any more lemons? Yes. Oh my god. I ate the whole thing in one bite. Pretty powerfully sour. Diana's stomach clenched. The oracle. There would be no hiding then. Tech nodded. Ooh, that lemon. A look of resignation was on her face. Visiting the oracle was no small decision. It required a sacrifice, and if the oracle found an Amazon's tribute wanting, she could inflict any number of punishments. "I'll light the signal fires to gather the council," Tech said, and she was gone without another word. It was all happening too quickly. Diana followed Hippolyta into her chambers. "Mother?" "If they ride hard, the council should be here within the hour," said Hippolyta. "Some members of the council lived at the Ephraim or Bonamigdal, but others preferred the more isolated parts of the island and would have to be summoned by the fires." Hippolyta shucked off the comfortable riding clothes and her silver circlet she'd worn at the arena and emerged from her dressing room a moment later in silks and deep purple of late plums, her right shoulder covered by a golden spalder and scales of gleaming mail. The armor was purely ornamental, the type of thing worn for affairs of state or emergency council meetings. "Help me bind my hair," Hippolyta said. She seated herself before the large looking-glass and selected a golden circlet of studded with heavy chunks of raw amethyst from the velvet-lined case. It seemed bizarre to Diana to stand there, plaiting her mother's ebony hair into braids, when the world around them might be falling apart. But a queen never appeared as anything less than a queen to her people. Diana summoned her courage. She needed to tell her mother about Aaliyah. She couldn't let go into a council's meeting without that knowledge. Maybe it isn't Aaliyah. It could be a disturbance in the world of man. Something, anything. But Diana did not really believe that. When the council consulted the oracle, Aaliyah would be discovered and Diana would be exiled. Her mother would look weak, indulgent. Not everyone loved Hippolyta as Tech did, and not everyone believed that a queen should rule the Amazons at all. "Mother, today, during the race," Hippolyta met Diana's eyes in the mirror and clasped her hands. "We'll talk about it later, but there is no shame in the loss." "That wasn't remotely true," Diana said. But Diana said, "It's not that." Hippolyta set 2 more amethysts in her ears. "Diana, you cannot afford more losses like that. I didn't think you would win." "You didn't?" Diana hated the hurt that spread through her, the surprise that she couldn't keep from her voice. "Of course not. You're still young. You're not as strong as the others or experienced. I hope you might place or at least not humiliate you." Hippolyta lifted a brow. "It takes more than the loss of a little race to bring low a queen, Diana. But you are not ready, and it will mean that you will work even harder to prove yourself in the future." Her mother's assessment of her chances was the same as her measured embrace of the platform, just as practical, just as painful. "I was ready," Diana said stubbornly. Hippolyta's look was gentle, loving, and full of pity that Diana wanted to scream. "The results speak for themselves. Your time will come." But it wouldn't. Not if she was never given the opportunity. Not even if her mother didn't think she could win a damned foot race. And Aaliyah. "Mother," Diana tried again. But Hippolyta was sweeping out of her chambers. Lamplight sparked off as gold in her armor. The earth shook, but somehow her steps did not falter. As if her very stride declared, "I am a queen and an Amazon. You are wise to tremble." In the mirror's glass, Diana saw herself reflected, a dark-haired girl in disheveled clothes, her blue eyes troubled, teeth worrying, her lower lip like some handwritten, ringing actor in a tragedy. She squared her shoulders, set her jaw. Diana might not be the queen, but the council members weren't the only ones who could petition the oracle. "I am princess of the Themyscira," she told the girl in the mirror. "I will find my own answers." So that is all for Chapter 2. Stay tuned for Chapter 3. This is a beautiful book.